brought this E-type in today because it stopped running. It's part of the ignition problem. I'm pretty sure it's ignition because when I turned it on to bring it inside the garage, I could hear the petrol pump clicking, which means I got fuel pressure. Annoying the car anyway. If anything's going to break on it, with the ignition. So I'm going to check that first. I put it on the hoist and I've lifted it up so that when I open the hood, I can get the hood all the way up. Gives me a bit more room, saves me banging my head. So I'm just going to lift it up now. And then the other thing I've got to do is undo the pin in here. Okay, so now my next thing is to get the starter button so I can crank the engine without anything having to get in and out and do the ignition and everything else. Okay, so I have my starter cables, so I'm going to put these on relay onto the battery terminal. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the battery terminal so that when I turn on the ignition, when I want to turn it back on again, when I crank it to test stuff, I just connect my battery. I don't have to get in and out of the car to keep turning the ignition on and off. So I'm going to turn the ignition on, then we'll continue. Alright, so what I'm going to do is put my spark tester on one of my plug wires and then crank it, connect my battery so I've got ignition, and then crank it. As you can see, I got nothing, I got no spark. So now I'm going to test it from the coil. So now we try it now. As you can see, we've got a lot of spark. You can actually hear it. That's the CD ignition that's causing that. If this was a regular ignition system, the original Opus system, it wouldn't be anywhere near as strong as that. But anyway, so we got a spark to that. So what I've got to do is take off the cap and see what the problem is, which I suspect, almost bet money on, is going to be the rotor. Okay. Okay, so I've got to pull all my wires off this side that are going to this side of the front side of the motor, so to get in the way of the doing everything. So to stop the cap coming off. So now I just undo my screws here. Three of them. I can move the cap back out of the way. So now I can see the rotor and the rotor on the end. As you can see, the rotor's pretty beat up on the end, so I'll stick a new rotor in and that should do the trick. Hang on. Okay, here we have the rotor, the new rotor. So I'm going to put the rotor on in position. The rotor's keyway, by the way. I don't know if you know, everybody would know that, but it can only go in one position. So I put the rotor on and I put my cap back in position. Tighten up my 3 screws. When I come to put my wires back on, in case you're thinking how the hell does it remember all that, well I don't. So there's bank A and there's bank B, and it goes back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's A and B. A is the bank that's further forward of the two, and unusually for Jaguars, the number 1 cylinder is actually at the front. With all the 6 cylinders, number 1 cylinder is at the back. Also on top of that, each of the wires, because I've used proper Jaguar wires or approved wires, it's got B2 written white on the wires. So I go around the firing order, and on the cap it's marked which way around it goes, so it makes it comparatively quite easy. I just got to put all the cables back in, but having said that, you can still screw it up. So I'll put all them back in, and then we'll see if the car will run. I won't bother checking it, I'm just going to fire it, see if it will run. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so now we should be able to see if it'll start. Alright. So obviously the car runs, and that was the problem with the rotor arm. The thing is, when I was trying to diagnose where the spark was coming from, I had the battery and disconnected the battery and left the ignition on to save me getting in and out the car. Once the engine's running, you can't be disconnecting the battery thinking that's going to stop the motor, because it won't. If the alternators are working, it'll charge the battery, and it'll charge without the battery being on it or run off the alternator, which is very bad for the alternator and for the diodes in it. So you don't do that. You have to go into the car and turn off the ignition correctly, like you normally do. Now, what I'm going to do is explain. On the original ignition system for this, it was an Opus system made by Lucas, or made for Lucas. That's long gone. It's got a different system on. It's got a system on that's made by MSD, and it's a capacity discharge system. And I've got a high voltage coil on it as well, and I've got a different trigger inside the cap. So I'm going to go on to that and explain what I took off and what I put on, and how I've wired this new system in, which works a lot better, as you can see off the sparking that we tried before. You can actually hear it. The old Opus system, you almost had to be in a cave to be able to see it. The spark was that weak. But anyway, so that's where we're going to go now. I'm going to explain what the difference is between the two systems. So over here on the bench, I've got some of the components of the original system. One is a resistor box. This was used to feed the coil and also feed the Opus unit that went in between the coil and this. I don't have an Opus unit. I don't know where it's gone. They're not worth anything when they don't work anyway. So it's years ago. I don't even know how I've ended up with a distributor. But anyway, the way that this works originally was, if we have a look inside it, we can see the rotor. If we took off the rotor, we've now got a pickup. The pickup is a Hall effect kind. It's got 3 wires, so that means it's powered, and this is 1970, 76, 75, you've got to remember. So this was powered, which was pretty good going. So it's got the Hall effect, and it's got little rods inserted inside the rotor, and the rotor turns. As it passes the Hall effect, it disrupts the magnetic field, and then it sends a signal to what would be the Opus, what we used to call an amplifier. And that would amplify and reverse the power to the coil, and it would ground the coil and spark, cause a spark. And this is actually an original coil off it. It's pretty mediocre compared to what I've got on the car. So if we go and have a look at the stuff on the car now, and then we'll see the comparison. So now as we look at the distributor in the car, you can see it's got an LED sensor in it rather than the Hall effect one. The slots in the rotor interrupt the light. When the light gets through on the slot, it signals the MSD unit. It's a square wave, by the way. Signals the MSD unit, fires a coil into the distributor and off to the different cylinders. So that's where the main difference is. I had to use this system with an LED because it was the only thing that I had that would fire 12 cylinders, because everything else is for 8 cylinders, 6 or 4. So to find one for 12 was quite difficult. That was the only one that I had or could get hold of. So that's why I'm using an LED in it. I couldn't get the original rotor to work with a Hall effect sensor. So that's that. Now you can see now where the MSD unit is and where the original coil has been taken out, and this one's been put in, and it's a high voltage coil to go with the MSD. The reason the rotor, by the way, wears out a lot faster than the cap, because the cap's not worn, is the rotor has to fire every single plug, and it fires 6 plugs every revolution. The cap, where it receives a spark from the rotor, only gets it once every two revolutions, so it's doing a lot less, so the cap lasts a lot longer. So anyway, that's about it for the whole thing. So there you go, that's what I had to do. I'm going to put a link down below, by the way, with the schematics of the way that the original Opus system was wired up, including the resistor piece that I just showed you, and then I'll put another one up with the MSD box, how that wired in and everything else. It's pretty straightforward. So anyway, there'll be a link underneath. So if you don't mind subscribing and all that other stuff people say, that would be good. Alright, thanks.